Welcome to my ultimate TriForce guide. Spoiler alert, and this is because autoplay, this is the Elementalist guide. Yes, welcome to my ultimate Elementalist guide. The Elementalist is one of the most tricky up and down classes. It's all over the place in experience. Just a warning, if you're about to unlock or play this class, you're at low prosperity, you don't have enough, many items unlocked, or you're playing with a party that can't create outside elements for you, help you do some of the element generation. This class is very difficult to play, and it's why the Elementalist is one of the most polarizing classes. Some people are like, it's the best class in the game. Other people are like, it's the worst class in the game. And that's because it's a class that the experience differs drastically depending on your situation. So fair warning. And in this guide, I'm going to talk about everything you need to know to play the class to an optimal level. And is it just me, or does anyone feel like Isaac, the creator of Gloomhaven, was maybe just using a thesaurus when he made this class? I looked up Tremulant, and I don't know, I'll flash it up here. It means tremulous or trembling, so it's a trembling cyclone. I don't know, I think it's funny. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to figure out exactly what it means. If you have any thoughts on that, make sure and comment below. And then every card is like a novel. So get ready to read. Make sure that you don't let your indecisive friend play this class. The amount of options on the cards are just ridiculous. And I'm going to talk you through, which cards to take and kind of how they interact with each other so that you can parse that information and go through all those options and, come out on the other side actually able to make a decision and in a reasonable amount of time, because analysis by paralysis is definitely a problem with this class. It has movement issues, and we'll talk about, what cards you should really take and how you should get past the movement issues. The initiative, while there are some okay early initiatives, we have a real problem with late initiatives, and you actually need, late initiatives to go late sometimes to make your plans work. We'll talk about that. And then I'm also going to talk about your perks. Should you take element perks or not? I'll just, go through the whole decision process and make sure that, you've got a good understanding of what changes occur in your play style depending on which perks you take and kind of which strategy you're going to go with. And then that's pretty much it. That's a lot. I think that's my longest intro ever. So stay tuned. It's going to be fun. Let's get to level 1 and X cards. Stoking Hail. Top is a nice solid range stun. If you're playing Shaping the Ether for the bottom, make sure you're taking this with you so you've got a little bit of crowd control. Initiative at 28 is not bad. And then the bottom, pretty straightforward. It's one of our move 2, and you get to empower fire. Fire is one of our, slightly harder elements to make just because of some card picks and how we're going to play. So great card. Make sure you're taking it. Lava Eruption. Top is a bit underpowered for me. 1 damage to everyone is just, it's not that great. The element generation is okay. Fire and earth together is good for obsidian shards. So if you're playing obsidian shards, this would be a nice lead into it, but I don't think it's going to be worth a loss for us. I think generally with this class, you're going to play 1 persistent loss, and I'll talk about that later, whether it's Formless Power or Shaping the Ether or some later level cards. But I think you're mostly going to play 1 persistent loss, and then you're going to be reasonably careful with your other losses. And I just don't think a 1 damage loss is going to be worth it, even if it sets you up for, a good turn later on with obsidian shards. Initiative at 19 is our second best at level 1. And then the bottom is just another move 2 with element generation. So you'll use it for the bottom a lot more than you'll use it for the top. Infernal Vortex. Top is a bit of a pain, but the great thing about having a loss like this on the top and a good repeatable bottom is that you can essentially just wait for your time to pounce. So when you've got this card in your hand, just make sure you're, looking closely to see if there's a spot where you can hit a bunch of monsters at exactly 2 range. And then when you do, and you hit 3 or 4 monsters, a level 1 loss that can do 12 to 16 damage is very powerful, even if it's super situational like this. I mean, if this card had a situational bottom, it would be terrible, but because it has such a great bottom, we're just going to move and, empower ice so we can consume it for our stuns and, a bunch of other stuff. Too many things for me to list. Man, parsing all these cards was really fun. It was a great challenge for me. I guess it's why I left this guy to last, because it's probably the hardest, overall class to really walk through. Anyways, the initiative is also very good. So take this card with you always. Watch for your opportunity to use the top, and especially at low levels, you're gonna wreck with this top. Tremulant Cyclone. Yeah, that card makes me laugh. Pretty good card though. Nice repeatable attack. You can, buff it up with air. And then, if you're using something like Formless Power, this could be an attack 3 on 3 targets with a push. Repeatable. Early on, pretty powerful. Whether or not we use Formless Power at earlier levels remains to be seen. I'll go through all that in detail. Initiative of 26, that's not bad for us. It's okay. It's in the range of, just being close to too slow, but still good. And then the bottom. And I just want to talk about all of these little moves. So we're going to use these little moves a lot because we get to move and empower an element, and that is very useful for us. So we're going to use these little moves a lot, which means you always have to be thinking about positioning. Some other classes, they sit still and they use top and bottom actions and gun away and do whatever, and then they do big moves every few turns. You're going to be taking little moves every turn, and so make sure you're not just hiding behind your allies. Try and move up to the side and be in optimal position every turn, as close to moving up to the next door as you can. So you essentially want to do somewhat of a side flank type of move. Make sure you're not taking aggro. Make sure the monsters, you're not pulling the monsters to you because you're squishy, and you're essentially, in the standard build, you're, basically a ranged damage dealer, using elements to do some fun stuff. But you've got to make sure you're not just hiding in the back, and then your allies who have a bunch of move 3, 4, 5, 6 take off on you and you're left behind. So make sure you're pushing up as much as you can without drawing aggro. Formless Power. And the top, you may look at it and go, ooh, I can, use elements that are just floating around and power this up. Nope. At early levels. And of course, your experience may vary. Just remember that sentence anytime I'm saying something, because depending on your party composition, you might have spare elements. If you do have, 2 spare elements kicking around a lot, this card can actually be pretty good at lower levels. Attack 4 at range 4 and getting experience is pretty good. But other than that, it's not a very good card, because at low levels, you don't have a lot of extra elements. Blinding Flash, if you're playing that, you will have a little bit of extra elements at early levels because you don't really have a way to use the light. And so you may be able to use this card if you're playing Blinding Flash. We'll talk about Blinding Flash and whether I think you should play it or not later on. And then the bottom of this card, at lower levels, again, for the reason I just specified, usually you're not going to have a ton of elements lying around at lower levels. And so if that's the case, don't take this bottom, because you can use your elements for more power generally by, take Tremulant Cyclone. For 1 air, you get +1 attack and you get to push instead of just this +1 attack. There's a bunch of examples like that. So generally, if you don't have a bunch of spare elements, you shouldn't be taking this card. And probably early on, we should be playing Shaping the Ether, but I'll go through exactly how Shaping the Ether affects every level 1 card when we get there. Shaping the Ether. And this one's gonna get complicated and long, so bear with me because I think it's one of the most interesting decision points, especially at earlier levels and for newer players. So, the top, it's actually quite good. And it's got a lot of flexibility. It can be a 2-target stun, it can do damage, etc. if you can, empower enough elements. But what I'm talking about is the bottom, where you -1 attack from every attack you make, and because of that you get to produce an element, empower an element every turn. And so I'm going to put a graphic up here. Cards that it doesn't really affect, Formless Power, because it produces or empowers an element, you always have that extra element to add +1 attack. So it actually technically makes Formless Power a little bit better because you can always get an XP with it. Encompassing Shadow, it doesn't affect at all. Brilliant Flash, it doesn't affect at all. And the next set of cards is cards that in a vacuum it actually makes better, right? So the first ones I want to talk about are Raw Enhancement and Pure Augmentation. At low levels, without using a loss, it's very difficult for you to, consume 2 elements for the tops of Raw Enhancement or Pure Augmentation. So having Shaping the Ether makes these cards playable, and it's super simple to just play one of your bottom move 2s and then use Shaping the Ether to empower the element at the end of the turn, and then you're always able to fire off a Raw Enhancement at attack 4 and a Pure Augmentation at attack 4. And so Shaping the Ether actually makes those cards better. And then other cards it actually makes better: Ice Spikes, Tremulant Cyclone, Stoking Hail, Malleable Evocation, Frigid Torrent. It makes all those cards better because it allows you either flexibility, like for Stoking Hail, you don't have to play it always after you play your bottom Ice 2 move, Infernal Vortex. And then things like Malleable Evocation, it's going to give you extra flexibility. And one thing you have a problem with when you're lower levels is that you're going to mostly want to use the elements you're empowering. You're mostly going to want to consume those elements for tops. And so by having Shaping the Ether out, you get a lot more, bottom action flexibility with, Malleable Evocation, Raw Enhancement, Pure Augmentation, stuff like that. So it's going to give you a lot more flexibility. It's going to make things easier for you. And the element, if you can't generate enough elements, then the element is actually going to be worth more than losing 1 from every attack. So let me explain as well. Like Frigid Torrent. If you can't make Earth, for whatever reason, you're not using the bottom of Tremulant Cyclone, or you want to play it for the top, you have, hardly any ways to make Earth. And so you don't get to use Frigid Torrent, which is amazing for level 1. I mean, target 2, pierce 2, attack 3 on each target. I mean, that's got to be one of the stronger level 1 cards out there. And so if you don't have Shaping the Ether and you can't create the right elements, it's going to hamper you more than the -1 attack. Now, if you can create enough elements, you should definitely not be playing Shaping the Ether. Once you get to that point, you should put Shaping Ether aside. If you've got items or you've got allies to help you and you're empowering a lot of elements, then you don't need Shaping the Ether. But Shaping the Ether, if you don't have enough elements to consistently pull off your 2-element cards like Burial, Winter's Edge, or Obsidian Shards, then you're going to have a problem, and Shaping Ether is the answer to that problem, because you'll be able to consistently play those cards when you're only empowering 1 other element, and it's going to make it really easy for you to do an Obsidian Shards. And with Shaping the Ether out, it's going to be attack 4, range 3, target 2. Very, very strong. And then Winter's Edge, you're always going to be able to add range and pierce. And Burial, you're always going to be able to get your +1 attack and immobilize, and +1 attack and curse. Stuff like that. Shaping Ether is really going to help you play 2-element cards. And it's going to help you play more elements for your bottom actions and be able to use an element for the top. So Shaping the Ether, if you're not able to consistently empower and use your 2-element cards, or you're having problems actually, using elements for your bottoms, it is going to balance out the one attack, because generally it, you know, using an element is going to be adding multiple attack. And so, you know, having that element created is going to make a big difference to you. Once you do produce enough elements to power up your cards, you put Shaping Ether aside, you bring in Formless Power, and you push your damage up even further. I hope that made sense. If you have any questions, absolutely feel free to, comment below. Let me know what you think. And just one last piece, Lava Eruption and Infernal Vortex top, they get worse. You can't even really use Lava Eruption top when you're playing Shaping the Ether bottom, because its enemies essentially 0 attack, so probably not going to be worth it. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. On to the next. Hopefully, you know, all that detail on Shaping the Ether was handy for you, help you to think through, you know, what really makes sense and what the trade-offs are for losing one attack for, you know, empowering an element of your choice every single turn. If you did, can you just make sure and hit the like button? It really helps the video out a lot. And if you're not a subscriber, you know, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button. And to all my current subscribers, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And also, I work with Noble Knight Games. I'm a small channel. I need your support. I've got a link down in the description. If you click on that link and you buy anything from Noble Knight Games, I make a small commission, and anything you can do to help the channel is greatly appreciated. Okay, let's get to the next card. Malleable Evocation. This is one of our Gloomhaven novel cards. There's a lot going on this card. However, at low levels especially, you don't have enough elements to power up this card enough. It doesn't do enough on its own. It really doesn't. There's a lot. It's objectively weaker. It's below the curve unless you have a ton of elements. So if you do have a ton of elements and you like to play reactively, it can be decent. But other than that, mostly they're going to leave this one at home. Encompassing Shadow. Granting invisibility and empowering an element is decently powerful, especially for level 1 with no conditions, and at initiative 23 it's pretty decent. Use this top a lot to make one of your friends invisible, and then have them, you know, open a door and block it, abusing the invisibility rules. Invisibility is a bit overpowered in Gloomhaven. That is being changed in Frosthaven though. And the bottom, it's no good. You need to produce elements with your bottom moves most of the time. You don't get attacked a lot. You're going to use this for the top almost every time. We can't use dark until level 3, but this is nice to set up for your burial, and, you know, later on when you need dark, it's a pretty useful card. Frigid Torrent. This is an amazing level 1 card. You know, only having to use one element, and, you know, unfortunately we have to play the bottom of Tremulant Cyclone, or we have to, you know, empower Earth another way. But attack 3 on 2 targets, piercing and initiative, sign me up. This is a very good level 1 card. Initiative is getting a little slow. The bottom, it's not super powerful, but this bottom is going to be one of those cards where you're going to be looking at the battlefield and you're going to see monsters near traps, and there's going to be a couple monsters nearby, and you're going to go, I'm going to be able to do like 12+ damage with this bottom loss and do an attack top, and I'm going to have a, you know, 15, 18, 20 damage turn. You're going to end up playing it for that. Just make sure you don't play it too early, because you really don't want to lose this top. But this bottom, even though it doesn't look super great, pulling and doing damage in an area like that, there's going to be that situation that just looks too juicy to pass up. Brilliant Flash. Top is fine, heal 3, at range 3, and empowering light is fine, but I never could find a spot for this card. The bottom, you're rarely in range, you have no top moves. So like the positioning, it rarely works out for this loot. And so sometimes your allies don't need a heal, and you've got a bottom that you can't use, and so this is a basic action. One thing I will say is that sometimes you need a non-attack top, and maybe at early levels this can fill that, so that, you know, as you're moving in between rooms you can do something useful, but it's still not worth it. I pretty much never took this card, and you probably shouldn't either. I mean, totally up to you. If you do think it's good, make sure and comment below, but I could never find a spot for it. Ice Spikes. What a great card. This top is very good. Better than Tremulant Cyclone. I mean, if you can do this before the monsters take their turn and you consume fire, that's 3 damage, repeatable. They're still wounded if they last another turn. Damage can even go up. You're doing 6, 9, 10 damage per use of this card, especially in higher player counts where there's enough monsters to consistently hit 2 or 3 targets. A very good, strong, usable top. Like, it's awesome. I used it a lot. The bottom is also quite good for burst damage too. An attack on the bottom like this with good range, and it's not good power for a loss, but for a bottom attack loss at attack 5, it's pretty good. And I used to like to follow this up. If I wasn't playing Shaping the Ether for the bottom, I like to play this and then pin a melee enemy, and then next turn I would have a 2 target stun ready to go. And it's pretty good little combo when you're at, fairly low level. So this is a very good card. Raw Enhancement and Pure Augmentation. I'm talking about both these at the same time because they're basically the same card. They're kind of hard to pull off to get, use both elements when you're lower levels. If you are having a hard time, just play Shape the Ether or Shaping the Ether bottom, and then you'll get, consistent attack 4s or consistent big moves when you need it. And these cards are pretty good to do a big move when you do find yourself out of position. So very useful for that. 2 pretty good cards. At level 2, we have Crystallizing Blast and we have Boiling Arc. Crystallizing Blast top it's flexible, but it's a bit weak. I mean, it's got good Hex AoE. I'm struggling here. Anyways, it can also be enhanced. We'll talk about that later. Flexible, but not super strong. And then the bottom, move 4 with the potential to shield. This is pretty good. We struggle with move, so having a move 4 that doesn't, cost us any elements is nice. Then we've got Boiling Arc. It's more powerful, but it's a pain to use. And in the context of, we're going to be a ranged damage dealer, I think there's actually a melee build here. I haven't built it. I've thought about it, and I've seen other people in the community talk about it. But for our purposes, Boiling Arc is just, it's too much of a pain. I don't think it's going to be as useful. The move 4 on the bottom is also inferior. You don't want to be taking a ton of damage. Like, you don't have a lot of hit points, and so Retaliate for you is worse than for other classes that are stronger and can actually take a hit. You wimp the Elementalist. And so it's better to have Shield so that, if you want to get in position and protect yourself, maybe you actually want to loot. Maybe this is the way you loot. You move, you shield yourself up, you get in position, let everyone take a shot at you, then next turn you loot because you're in the right position. Anyways, I'm taking Crystallizing Blast. I'm taking it mostly for the move and for that shield, which can occasionally be useful. At level 3, we have Burial and we have Chain Lightning. Burial is a very good, strong loss attack. Optimal conditions, you do 18 damage if you hit 3 targets, and you immobilize, and you pump out curses. Remember though, if you kill a monster, that curse doesn't happen. And so, a 6 damage attack is pretty strong. You're probably not getting 3 curses when you hit 3 targets unless you're at, fairly high levels. And then the bottom of this card, very, very good. So flexible, able to add burst damage. You can, stop and not move for a turn and really dish out some good damage. I love a bottom attack at 3 with 4 range, especially at level 3. It's a very, very strong card. Chain Lightning, top is so cool. I mean, it's got to be one of the cooler cards. Chain Lightning is always an awesome effect, but it doesn't do as much damage. It's 5 on the first, 4 on the second, 3 on the third, 2 on the fourth, technically. So that would be 14 damage. And you may think, yeah, but it's better against shielded enemies. It's not really, though. It's pretty close. So let's just take a situation where you can hit as many targets as you want and they all have shield too. Chain Lightning does 14 damage and Burial does 12 damage. So Chain Lightning is technically slightly better, but because Burial has a total higher damage, it, can punch through 2 shield fairly well, right? And so you would do 12 damage, but you would put in 3 curses and immobilize 3 monsters versus Chain Lightning's 14 damage through shield. So I think functionally, Burial is actually better. And then the bottom, so top versus top, and then the bottom, the heal is on average not going to be as useful as the attack. In Gloomhaven, the best monster is a dead monster because they don't have the ability to damage you. You don't have to spend a turn healing if they're dead. So all in all, Burial to me is a functionally superior card in almost every single way, and I'm taking it every time over Chain Lightning. At level 4, we have Gravel Vortex and we have Primal Duality. Gravel Vortex top, it's okay, but it's so tough when playing a standard build to put yourself in range of multiple monsters when you're so squishy. You're going to have a hard time pulling this off, even though an attack 2 on everybody adjacent that's reusable is okay. Although, I mean, we also don't have a great modifier deck for just outputting pure damage either, so I guess that takes it down somewhat from other classes that have similar abilities. The Loot 1 on the bottom that turns into a Loot 2. Loot 2 reusable is actually decently powerful, and if you want, a lot of money, that's a good way to get it. Loot 1 covers 6 hexes. Loot 2 is 3 times as powerful. I'm going to chuck a graphic up here. 18 hexes when you loot 2 versus the 6 for 1. Primal Duality, the top, it's pretty good. It's not a massively powerful loss for this level. 10 damage is, it's pretty good, but it is split out amongst 2 targets, so when you're hitting shielded monsters, can be a problem. Does empower 2 elements, which is nice. Good initiative as well, but the reason why Primal Duality kicks ass is the bottom. It sets us up for some later cards so well, and we get to move when we do it. It's essential for a standard kind of, build that we're going for in this. And fringe builds, you could maybe theoretically take Gravel Vortex if you're doing something really different. You're a melee person or something. You're going melee build. But Primal Duality bottom is amazing. And the top is really good. So you use the bottom, you power up all your stuff, you move, and then near to the end of the scenario, you use a nice, reasonably strong loss. And that's why I'm taking Primal Duality 100% of the time. At level 5, we have Winter's Edge and we have Obsidian Shards. Winter's Edge top is really nice because we don't have to consume elements to get an attack 5, and that's quite nice. And then when you do consume elements, this thing is a shield destroyer. Some monster types become almost non-threats because of this card. Low hit point, high shield, you just punch through and completely destroy them. And then the bottom, heal 2, range 2, and, empower fire and light. It's 2 elements. You're doing something with the bottom. It's not bad. And then we've got Obsidian Shards. If you can make fire and earth consistently, this card is very, very good. It's an attack 5, range 3, target 2. It's essentially as good as Primal Duality power-wise, except it's not a loss. It's really, really good. And this, something like Shaping the Ether bottom can make it super easy to pull this card off, and then it becomes an attack 4, but still very good. So, if you do want to take this card and you're having a hard time making, earth and fire, you may want to play Shaping the Ether for a little while to help you pull that off with ease. And then the bottom, I like the bottom better as well. It produces dark and ice. I think it's a little bit more useful to us overall. So if you can produce fire and earth, take Obsidian Shards. If not, if you're having a little bit of element generation problems, maybe you don't have the right crew with you, maybe you don't have the right items, take Winter's Edge. It's going to be a nice break where you can get a decent attack without having to use elements. And like I said, some monsters are going to go bye-bye when you use it. At level 6, we have Simulacrum and we have Eye of the Hurricane. Simulacrum is just, it makes me laugh. Do you have more elements than you could ever use on a consistent basis? Are you swimming in elements? Are you drowning in elements? Are you tripping over elements as you go through the door? Are there elements just floating around through the air in front of you? then this card can be pretty decent. But objectively, it's kind of like Malleable Evocation, where unless you just have this absolute glut of elements, it's functionally weaker than other cards. And I think in most cases, it's not going to be the right choice. However, it does have great late initiative, and we actually struggle with that. I don't know, it's somewhere in the 60s where that's the latest we can go so far. So 94 initiative is actually quite welcome. The bottom is also more useful than you think, and this is one of those cards that could tie into some sort of fringe melee build, and it's pretty good for absorbing some aggro, and it will move with you, so the doppelganger is actually fairly decent until you get any higher than here. That's the problem. You take it at level 6, and then at scenario level 4, 5, 6, 7, it's gonna be worse. So it's decent, but yeah, it's not quite there. And then Eye of the Hurricane, this top, it's a write-off. I mean, it's got an average level heal and then a situational attack. It's a loss once you get up to that level. Like, what if you have a perfect situation, but your friend doesn't need a heal? You're gonna attack 2 for a loss, right? Like, objectively, it's weak. Initiative is okay at 29. The bottom is a big old move if you need it and a jump, so a little bit of flexibility there, but overall it's not a good card. If you have more elements than you know what to do with, you can take Simulacrum. The top is not bad if you just like are just rolling like Scrooge McDucking through your elements. I'm gonna put a little video up. If nobody remembers that, Scrooge McDuck used to swim through his money. If you're doing that with elements, Simulacrum is okay. If not, take the level 5 card you didn't take. At level 7, we have Vengeance, and we have Vengeance. There are no other cards at this level. There really aren't. Just joking. We have Pragmatic Reinforcement, which at most levels would be quite a good card, so I'll talk about it first. The top of Pragmatic Reinforcement is great because it could allow you to get Vengeance back. Or it can allow another ally who's, a real beast to get a card back. And, it's actually a pretty good top. Consistently healing somebody and getting their card back, mostly the getting the card back, is really good. And then the bottom is just a really nice, solid, flexible attack. Attack 3, range 3, and an XP for no cost on the bottom is actually really good, and then you can juice it up too. I mean, it's a good card. Unfortunately, it's against Vengeance, which is one of the top 3 cards in the game. It is ridiculous. And because you have Primal Duality and you just make all the elements and move with no problems, you can just go around and murder all the normal enemies while your friends pick away at the elites or do whatever. This card can do well over 100 damage easy in a scenario, especially at higher levels. I mean, you can be nuking 30, 40 hit points worth of value in one use. I mean, it's ridiculous. The bottom, well, it's there, but you'll probably never use it. I mean, it's fine. It's a move with Retaliate. You can retaliate some more or give your ally some more Retaliate. But the top is it's ridiculous. If you want the most powerful build, you can go with Vengeance. If you're tired of Vengeance just making the game really easy, then you can go with another pick. It's a card that, in the right hands makes the Elementalist just ridiculous at this level. Take Vengeance. I don't know if I even need to say that, but take Vengeance. At level 8, we have Volatile Consumption and we have Elemental Aegis. Volatile Consumption top, it's the range really hampers it. I mean, once you're higher levels, you can be adding 2 damage, 2 suffer damage, or you can heal, so you can really get rid of a lot of poison, wounds, stuff like that. But the range, that is going to cause you so many problems because you're a decently long range damage dealer, and often you're not going to have a target within range 2, which completely destroys this card. If it was unlimited range, it might have a chance of competing against like Formless Power or something along those lines. Because Formless Power, if you hit 2 targets, it does 2 damage, which is, basically what this card is going to do per round. So for this level, it's just not good enough. The bottom is actually decently powerful. I mean, you can wound and immobilize. You can destroy rooms of melee monsters with this by consuming, 4 elements. But then you can actually pin them in place and wound them, and it can be pretty good. And that's a big time move at 7 move. So pretty decent bottom, but I don't know if we need it. Elemental Egg is the top. Do you want more shield? Then you know what to do with. 6 shield is a lot. This, I think, could actually be usable in some sort of fringe melee build, but I just don't think we're really going to use that very often. The initiative, though, is pretty darn good. The bottom, heal 5 self, empower light, it's good. I don't know if it's level 8 good. In fact, I know it's not level 8 good, but it's okay. Go back and take Pragmatic Reinforcement, and then consume a light to use Vengeance minimum twice every rest cycle, not including stamina potions and whatever else you got going on. And that's just the most powerful way of playing. If you do take one of these, totally cool. And I don't want to come across as like, oh, this is how you have to play. I'm just talking about like what is, actually objectively the most powerful, because there's a lot of actually really cool things you can do with the Elementalist, but it can't all be covered in one guide. I'll be putting out probably at least 3 or 4 Elementalist videos down the road where I talk about specific build paths, and I think that'll be really fun. But for this, I think going back and getting Pragmatic Reinforcement is better. At level 9, we have Ethereal Manifestation, and we have Eternal Equilibrium. I did it without looking at the cards. Do you see that? I'm so proud of myself right now. The top of Ethereal Manifestation, I just looked there. The top of Ethereal Manifestation. This summon is actually pretty decent. 2 damage is not quite enough, but another way of, dishing out some damage and, empowering an element every turn. It can get really crazy if you play this with Shaping the Ether, and then you take a lot of element perks, and then you've got items and stuff. It can feel really amazing to play an Elementalist like this. I don't know if it's the most powerful way, but it feels amazing because you have a ridiculous amount of flexibility when you're, empowering so many elements every turn. I thought it was a really fun way to play. So I have actually taken this card. It's objectively not as powerful as Eternal Equilibrium, but we'll get to that. And then the bottom of this card, just Swiss Army knife stuff, fairly decent. It does have super late initiative too, which is really nice. If you didn't take Simulacrum, having 98 initiative is nice for when you want to go last. And then Eternal Equilibrium, attack 4 and cursing and muddling when you just use Dark and Light, which can be produced easily by Primal Duality, although you're probably going to be using it for Vengeance. So if you do have Eternal Equilibrium and Vengeance, you're going to need to have a plan to empower enough Dark and Light, because you're going to need to empower 3 Light per rest cycle and 2 Dark. So use Pragmatic Reinforcement for 1 Light to get back Vengeance. No, you're going to have to, when you use Vengeance twice, you're going to need 4 Dark, 4 Light, and 3 Dark in a rest cycle. That's quite a bit. So make sure if you're playing those that you have a plan for that, because otherwise you're not going to have enough to do all the crazy murdering and cursing and all the things that you really want to do. And then the bottom, heal 4, range 4, retaliate 2, shield 2, potentially. It's pretty decent. It's, nice and flexible, but the top, you can put out a ridiculous amount of curses and muddle everybody. I'm going to put up a graphic here. I'll show you what range 3 does, like everything within range 3 versus everything within range 2. It makes a huge difference, and I believe, just off memory, you're hitting 36 hexes versus 18. That's a lot of hexes. You can pretty much hit an entire room if you just run and throw yourself into the middle. So I'm taking Eternal Equilibrium for just objective power, but if you're playing an Elementalist and you've, played a decent amount, you should try a build out where you take the top of Ethereal Manifestation and use the summon, you play Shaping the Ether, and then you use, a bunch of items to produce elements and stuff like that. It can be so fun. Okay, let's talk enhancements. My first is a little bit of a tip, and I've actually got a video. I'll put a link down in the description. It's called Obscure Rules, 6 Obscure Rules. A card that adds targets via element consumption, you only pay a single target cost. And of course, it has to have a single target on the card. But for example, Frigid Torrent, it's a single target and you add targets by consuming earth. You only pay the single target enhancement cost. That's a tip for you. So, Frigid Torrent, 50 gold, add +1 attack. This is going to be attack 4, ×2, pierce 2, and an XP. If you're really early levels, that is going to be dastardly, and it's amazing. The next is you can add an extra element of whatever kind you want to one of the move 2 bottoms. I probably wouldn't add it to Stoking Hail or Tremulant Cyclone though, because I think you actually use those tops a decent amount at lower levels, and you don't want to enhance a bottom where you're going to use the top, 50% of the time or whatever it is. So if you're using those, pick the other 2. If you're not using them, you can enhance whatever you want. Whatever makes sense for your build. There is a lot of nuance here in the Elementalist. And then my last is Crystallizing Blast. It's kind of like, it's basically exactly like Dirk Tornado for the most part. The level 1 Cragheart card, aka Curse-nado. I've made a video on, why I think enhancements are broken. I'll also link that down in the description so that you can go and take a look. However, if you add Curse to this, it's 75 gold, right? Then ×2 for multi-target, then add 25. So for 175 gold, you can Curse in this massive AoE, and it's going to be pretty nasty. Also, if you just have a bunch of spare gold for how much? 325 gold, disarm. You're going to disarm a lot of monsters, and it's going to be super powerful for you. Probably too powerful. It depends on what you like. If you like a challenge, don't do any of those things I just said. If you like to just go in and God mode it for a little while, yeah, definitely do that. Okay, that's it for enhancements. Let's move on to perks. Perks. And I think it's a really interesting choice for the Elementalist, what you should do. So, in my opinion, the funnest way is to generate elements with the Elementalist. And pretty hard to mathematically prove it out, but I actually think that adding elements will make you more powerful. However, let me caveat that. It is going to cause more variance for you, because you're going to have more negatives left in your deck, and you're going to be randomly creating elements that you didn't plan for. You're going to need to have a really good understanding of the class to make this work and to make yourself more powerful. Or you take Shaping the Ether. If you have Shaping the Ether out, you can always create another element to synergize with the random element that you played, and you can probably do something useful with it. And if you do, take all of the element generation perks, you can use cards like Simulacrum to a higher level. You can use Malleable Evocation. There's a lot of different things you can do. And then if you throw Ethereal Manifestation and you play that summon, you can produce a lot of elements, especially when you're AoEing. So if you do go the element generation route, I believe it is more powerful. However, you're going to have to really pay attention, and you may have to take Shaping Ether, or you may have to play Ethereal Manifestation, or you just have to have a really good high-level understanding of how the class plays. If you're just doing this for the first time, you're fairly low levels, you're at low prosperity levels, I wouldn't do that. I would go get rid of the -1s first, and then get rid of the -2 or the -1 with the +1, and then choose either fire or ice next, so you have some element generation, whatever you need more. I recommended at level 2 that you take Crystallizing Blast. So you'll probably, if you take Crystallizing Blast, you'll probably need fire a little bit more because you're producing it less. And so you may want to go fire, but go fire or ice first, depending on what makes sense. But I like taking all the elements and getting crazy. It's the funnest way to play, but it is difficult. So bear that in mind. Items are going to be fairly basic because I don't want to spoiler too many things, but here's what I would say. Anything that you can find that generates elements for you, especially if it's only a spend item, that's going to be really good. You know, having as many elements as possible and really unlocking the full power of the Elementalist, it feels great. If you can get yourself in the right situation and you have elements galore and you're with the right party, the Elementalist can be the finest class. It really can. I've also got a video on the 4 funnest classes. I'm plugging a lot of other videos in this one. The 4 funnest classes. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. Go ahead and check that out. But anyways, elements. Take Boots of Striding at level 1. They're going to allow you to move a little bit more when you need to because you're going to be using a lot of those move to generate element cards like Tremulant Cyclone and whatever else, and Stoking Hail, etc. And then, of course, you always want a Minor Stem. So fairly basic item recommendations, but yeah, just go out there and get things that make elements. Thank you so much for watching the video. That's pretty much the end. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I really appreciate all of the support.